The EU should get Vladimir Putin's threats he could nuclear weapons in the conflict in Ukraine seriously, the bloc's foreign policy chief has said. Josep Borrell told the BBC's L'Ais Doucet that the war had reached a risky moment. His remarks arrive as Russia begins a partial mobilization and moves to annex 4 regions of Ukraine. Mr. Putin has faced setbacks on the battlefield, with his forces pushed back by a Ukrainian counteroffensive. Certainly it's a risky moment because the Russian army has been pushed into a corner, and Putin's reaction, threatening using nuclear arms, it's very bad, Mr. Borrell said. 7 months since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began, analysts consent that President Putin's forces are on the back foot, but he said a diplomatic solution should be reached, one that preserves the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Otherwise, we can finish the war, but we'll not have peace, and we'll have another war, he said. In a scarce address to the nation earlier this week, Mr. Putin said his country had various weapons of destruction and would all the means available to us, adding, "I am not bluffing. When people say it's not a bluff, you've to get them seriously," Mr. Borrell said. In the same speech, President Putin announced the call-up of 300,000 Russians who have done obligatory military service, sparking protests and reports of people fleeing the country to avert being sent to the front line. It comes after a rapid counteroffensive in which Ukraine says it took more than 8,000 sq kilometer, 3,088 sq miles, back Russian forces. Presently self-styled referendums on joining Russia are being held in 4 occupied regions. Ukraine has denounced these as annexation attempts, and reported that armed Russian soldiers are going door-to-door collecting votes. Ukraine has dominated this year's UN Common Gathering as this costly war drags on with no clear sense of a way out. Europe's foreign policy chief was surprisingly blunt and visibly pained. He shared the anxious lament he was hearing everywhere he went. Friends on holiday, to leaders around the world attending the UN Common Gathering this week, they were all asking him when this war would end. "Stop this war, I cannot pay my electricity bill," was, he regretted, a common refrain. Mr. Borrell was willing to declare in public what many express in private, that Europe and its allies were struggling to control the narrative in this war as Russia spins the view that European sanctions against Russia were to blame for this suffering. But Moscow's new and worrying threats, including a thinly veiled nuclear one, are also concentrating minds. Most Western leaders, including Mr. Borrell, are still categorical about the necessity to stay the course in a conflict with many far-reaching consequences, most of all for Ukraine, but many others too. Mr. Borrell dismissed concerns that the EU's arms supplies were running low, and said it should continue providing military support to Ukraine, as well as applying economic sanctions against President Putin and his allies and conducting diplomatic activity. He admitted that the rising cost of energy prices caused by the conflict was a matter of concern. "People in my country tell me the price of the gas means we cannot continue working, we cannot continue making my business run," the Spanish politician said, adding he'd heard similar concerns leaders Africa, America, and Southeast Asia. Mr. Borrell called on President Putin to play his portion in reaching a negotiated solution, saying in order to dance the tango, you necessity too. "Everybody who's gone to Moscow, to the Kremlin to speak to Putin, they came back with the same answer, Putin, have military objectives, and if I do not obtain these military objectives I'll continue the fight. This is certainly a worrisome direction, but we've to continue maintain Ukraine," he said. For more emergency news, subscribe.